All right. Hello, everyone. I wanted to make a video today showing you guys exactly how easy it is to install Linux Mint. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to the Linux Mint website, linuxmint.com. You're going to get right on the front page a download option. You hit download and it will take you to a screen here where you can pick what edition you want to download. Now, for this case, just for the sake of this video, I'm going to download Linux Mint Mate. You can go through the torrent download. You can pick a mirror. In this case, I'm going to pick this one. Save. You can see I already have it downloaded there. And see, that's how easy it is to get the download started. It takes literally less than a minute. Now, I already have this downloaded, so I'm going to go ahead and stop that. And the next thing you need to do is create a writable USB. Now, in order to create a writable USB, since I'm already running Ubuntu, it's incredibly easy for me. I just go into my start menu, I go USB, start up disk creator, I can open it up, and I've already got everything I need here. So I go through other, I click Linux Mint Mate ISO, and I have my USB stick plugged in. I just hit make startup disk. You type in your root password, and there you go. Now, for anybody who's already running Linux, this is easy peasy. So if you were running Windows, the process would be a little bit different. Personally, I use Ventoy to create a startup disks on Windows, but there's a bunch of startup disk creators and they all work. But if you want to use Ventoy, what you would do is you would go to downloads, you would download the Windows zip, you would then unzip it and then run it. And it would be a very similar process to what I just showed you. I might make a video on that at a later date. So once all this is done, what you're going to do is you're going to simply reboot your system, and your computer should detect boot from USB. You go boot from USB, and it'll put you into a live Linux desktop, which that's where I'm going to see you next. So now this is the exact screen that you should get after you plug that USB into your computer and then reboot. It will bring you up to a menu that says try Linux Mint, and if you hit or continue to Linux Mint, you hit that, and this is the screen it brings to you. This is what you call a live environment that is currently running from a USB. Now, the way that I have this set up for recording purposes is through a VM, but I kind of want to make a point with this because I have this running on a VM with 1 core, 4 gigs of RAM, and 128 megabytes of video memory. Now, bear in mind, Linux Mint actually has a reputation for being one of the most resource-hungry Linux distributions. And I'm going to show you that it will still run on what I just named. So, we're going to get right to business, and we're going to hit install Linux Mint. And sometimes these installers take a minute to load. One thing I do want to say about Linux Mint in particular is that I actually kind of like how it forces you into the live environment, because it's always best to try to install from the live environment instead of going to a graphical installer first, because it gives you a chance to see if you're going to have any, or it can at least give you a chance to see if you're going to have any hardware issues with your computer. Like, it gives you a chance to make sure stuff like the wireless is working. So, we're going to go English. We're going to go English US. Always make sure you hit English US. Don't hit English Canada. It'll screw up your keyboard. We're going to tick yes to install the multimedia codecs. That's what I always do. I know there's some people that are kind of more ideologically free and open source software that might not want to do that, but I always do. So now we're just going to give it a minute here. So, now what we're going to do here, okay, the way I'm doing it right now, because I don't have anything else on this virtual machine, I'm just going to erase the entire disk and install Linux. That's all I'm going to do. If you go through the other option, you can resize everything yourself, but in this case, there's no point. Now, why did it bring me up there? So I'm going to go here, pick. It's going to let me set the time zone. So we're going to set it to a London, England. Now, this is where you're going to set your username, your host name, and your password. So for my name, we're going to go CCNG. CCNG VirtualBox is just fine. And I'm going to put the password in. Now, this password is going to be very, very important for you to remember later on, because you're going to have to use this every single time that it asks you for the root password. And we're not going to tick encrypt the home folder because that's not really necessary on a desktop install generally, and it can cause a lot of pains in the butt for you. So, now, I'm going to show you exactly what it's doing here, because it's just copying files. Nice thing about the Mint installer, and this, I believe it's the same with the Ubuntu installer, it's the same with a lot of them. It'll actually show you everything it's doing, if you choose to. Also, these installs, this is actually something that I wanted to talk about here. Linux is actually much, much easier to install than Windows. Because with Linux, these installs go a lot faster. And then once you get everything installed, you've only got to update it maybe 2 or 3 times at the most. You can do it all in one shot. You can see how quickly this is going already here. Now, this might be the part where, this should be the part where I should talk to you about why you should use Linux over Windows. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. It's because Windows is garbage. It is hot garbage. I know, and I say that as somebody who was using Windows again until last week. That's not to say that I've only been using Linux for a week, but Windows has all these little allures that get you back, like modded Bethesda games. That's what did it for me. But with Linux, it's less resource hungry. It just works better. It's really, really prime for you to learn about it a lot more. And open source software is frankly just awesome. It's a very, how do I put it? It's a very, very philosophy that's very, very contrary to what's happening right now in the software world, where everything's getting crappier and crappier in a lot of ways. But then a lot of open source software is kind of pushing back against the ways that everything's getting crappier and crappier. Like, for example, Windows is at the point now where it's almost a giant piece of spyware. And it's pretty well the same with Mac. I'm less familiar with Mac than I am with Windows. But under Linux, outside of a few things with Canonical, that doesn't exist. You know? And the other thing is too, and this is actually a big thing that I have an issue with, is how, if anybody remembers 10, 15 years ago, we were promised, oh, well, computer hardware is going to advance so much. We're going to be able to do so much more. Blah, 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 blah. Well, computer hardware has advanced tremendously in the last 15 years. But what more can we really do with our computers? Like, what can we really do with our computers that we weren't doing 15 years ago? Okay? The answer is, like, outside of a few, like, very, very high-end games, we're all pretty much using our computers the same way. Like, you know, we're all still, like, using web browsers to go on YouTube and stuff like that. You know, it's all pretty much the same. But then, if you look at a hardware requirements for stuff like Windows 10 and stuff like that, a lot of computers that we were using to do the exact same thing back then won't even run Windows 10. Despite the fact that they're doing the same thing. And there's a reason for this, too. It's because, well, there's a lot of reasons for this, actually. But the big one is that back in the day, developers used to have to do all these little things to try to optimize the resource use on their software. Okay? And now, because hardware has gotten so great, a lot of them don't do that anymore. In fact, a lot of them don't even know how to do that anymore. That's a whole topic for a whole other video about how, like, there's been a huge problem with passing down skills in IT. But when we come back over to Linux land, people are still doing that kind of thing. You know, like, Linux, as you can just see just here, is running much better on a lower spec machine than Windows ever would. And that's a great use of Linux. Linux is absolutely fantastic for trying to nurse more life out of your old computers. And look how fast this install's gone. It's already almost done. Another great thing about Linux, that if you're new to the Linux ecosystem, is no viruses. Now, granted, I haven't had a problem with a Windows virus in a long time, so there's that. And I'm probably, you know, jinxing myself by saying this, but Linux doesn't have viruses, and it doesn't have, and it's not just because it's less popular. That's part of it. It's also because Linux is a inherent to its architecture. Its inherent architecture also makes it less vulnerable to viruses, is what I should say. So, now we're at the language packs already. One of the interesting things about Linux is that, some people are going to find this kind of controversial, but Linux is easier to install than Windows. I will say that 100%. Because look how fast this is going. A Windows 10 install like this would probably take, I haven't timed it, but it would probably take at least an hour. Because I'm the kind of guy that once it gets to, like, a certain part of the install, I go do something else and then I let it run. But Linux is easier to install because it's faster, it's more intuitive, and once you're done, I know I said this a minute ago, but once you're done the install, it'll only take a couple of minutes to upgrade pretty much everything and get everything up to date. Whereas Windows, if anyone's ever installed Windows, you can know that, like, that process can take anywhere from hours to, I've seen it take days. Okay, because Windows, you got to install one batch of updates, and another batch of updates, and another batch of updates. With Linux, you can do it all in one. The most common way to do it would probably be 2 to 3 steps, depending on how many updates you have to run. So, while this is installing, I also want to take a minute and show you guys this lovely Mate desktop. So, Mate is kind of like the fork of the old GNOME 2, and one of the things I want to give a lot of compliments to the Linux Mint team is they do an excellent job taking an old desktop and making it actually look quite sleek and quite modern. You can see this is the menu that it brings up here. A very easy to navigate menu where you can switch between favorites and all applications, and it gives you this very nice kind of 3-columned look that makes everything very plain, very easy to navigate. They do an excellent job with Mate and the Mate integration. I did try out Cinnamon recently as well. The Cinnamon is good. It's much, much better than it was. I used to find the Cinnamon installs to be very, very... Or Cinnamon as a desktop, I should say, not install. I used to find it to be very finicky, but I was trying it out a couple of days ago on a VM, and it actually seemed to be working a lot better these days. So, because the last time I used it before this was a couple of years ago. I've been very much a stick in the mud when it comes to Mate and changing my desktop, because if any of you guys remember like the GNOME 3 days, when GNOME 3 first came out, and what a big uproar that was, and how a bunch of guys were like, I'm never going to use GNOME 3, I absolutely hate it, and they all stuck with Mate. Well, I was one of those guys that absolutely despised GNOME 3 and stuck with Mate. But coming back into the Linux world again, I've been a little bit more open-minded. But Mate, the way the Mint team implements it in particular is absolutely fantastic. Another great thing is too, they set it up so that you got some very good quick launch options here, like your file browser, terminal, Firefox. And look at that. Our install is already almost done. The Mint Software Center. Oh, look, here we go. I'll restart now. All right, you know what? That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to restart now because I want to show you guys. I was talking about it a minute ago, but I want to show you guys just how easy it is to run the updates on Linux Mint. Oh. Let's see if it's going to actually reboot for us. Should. All right, perfect. All right, so yeah, this is a really common thing with fresh Linux installs, is when it gives you this like really, really crappy resolution. But this is going to be super easy to fix. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. You're going to go to the menu, you're going to go displays, and in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go to 1080p. You're going to hit apply system wide. That'll apply it permanent for everyone. Unless you want other people on your system to have this crappy resolution, but I doubt that. That'll kind of save it, and then you hit apply and keep configuration. There you go. Linux Mint also gives you a very, very helpful welcome screen that gives you first steps, documentation, and Linux Mint, by the way, has a great community and excellent documentation. So, this is your brand new installed Linux Mint desktop. Now, I was talking about the updates earlier. This is what I want to show you. So, the little shield in the corner here, welcome to Update Manager. You click that. You hit OK here. And this is going to be the first date you're going to update your... So this time we're probably going to have to install the updates in 3 stages because it needs to update the updater. Alright, so that update's done. Now you can see, because we just installed it, we got quite a few updates here that we got to run. So we're going to install updates. Oh. Okay, so this time it's going to get us everything in 2 stages. I have to admit, I wasn't sure if it was going to pull the kernel updates at the same time, because generally you kind of want to install kernel updates separately. That's kind of considered the best practice. So we got 5 minutes. I'm going to show you around the desktop a little bit more. Linux Mint gives you a very, very easy to use control center that puts everything up in your face all at once. This here is particularly handy. Because what that allows you to do is load proprietary drivers for certain pieces of hardware. I've had to use it quite a bit in the past for wireless cards. Now, that's not going to find the drivers right now because we're running the updates. Because, now this is going to be me explaining if you've used Linux and you're an experienced Linux user, you already know this, but for those of you that are new to Linux, you cannot install you cannot install 2 programs at the same time. Unlike Windows, Linux uses something called package management, where instead of just going off and finding a software wherever on the internet that you find it, Linux has these things called repositories. And these repositories hold the executables for all the software that you can install, for all the software you want to install in your distro. Okay, distro being the type of Linux that you use, like Linux Mint. So, when you want to install a piece of software on Linux, what you do instead is, instead of going to like a random website like you do in Windows, you go to something like Software Manager here. Okay. You type in the piece of software you want, and you hit install. But because of that, it means that you can only install one piece of software at a time, because whatever you're installing puts a lock on the package manager. So right now, this isn't going to generate a cache either. I'm just saying, because again, we're running the updates, but I'm just showing you where you would go if you did want to install something. Now, in the modern day, we have this thing called a Flatpaks and stuff like that, but that's a little bit beyond the scope of this video, because those are absolutely awesome and they're a huge change, but I think those kind of deserve their own video. Linux Mint also comes out of the box with a full Office suite, LibreOffice Writer, and one of the nice things about Linux Mint is that it comes with a ton of because you saw where I ticked a multimedia codecs earlier in the install, Linux Mint will play pretty much any type of video or a audio that you can throw at it. I know that is less of a big deal these days, but that used to be back in the day. That was something that could be a pain in the butt under Linux. Not so much anymore. You also come with Firefox and Thunderbird for your web browser and email, and transmission for a Lawrence. We got 3 minutes left on the updates. This is another cool thing here is that, as I was talking about with the repositories here, is that it actually has a GUI to let you change them. That works quite well. Bear in mind, right now, we're almost done. We're almost done the updates, and there was 680 megabytes of updates, if I'm remembering right when I looked. Oh, I'm going to show you a few more things while we're here, because we can go in here. Because actually, here, let me go back and show you back how we got here. So, the easiest Linux Mint is like one of the easiest distros out there to change stuff on. Okay, because you can just go Start Menu, Control Center, and it brings up everything, pretty much everything for you. Okay, and we're gonna go, and I'm gonna show you guys how to change the theme a little bit, because you know this light theme, it kind of sucks. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to Mint L Darker. We can also pick Mint L Aqua, Brown, and we can go get more themes online. And this opens up a entire page. We're gonna go GTK3 themes. Pretty much everything uses GTK3 themes these days. Actually, I think they're even kind of moving on to GTK4. But yeah, here we are. A blast from the past is what this website always kind of looks like to me. But you can go here. You've got all kinds of themes here that you can pick from. Let's try this one. Mick Mojave. You know, that kind of reminds me of Fallout New Vegas. So the nice thing about the mate themes is that it comes with an option where you can just use an installer to install the themes automatically. So let's see if this works. I don't know, where'd you put my download? Oh. Do we have, does it come with OCS URL? I was playing around with this last night. But yeah, this is where you go to install themes. Let's check those updates. Yeah, 600 megabytes of updates, and now it's actually even installing them. I might have a fair download. Huh. Okay. So let me see something here. I think that in order to get them, we may have to install the OCS-store. I thought Mint came with that by default. So okay. So Mint does not come with, it's OCS URL. Mint does not come with OCS URL by default. Interesting. So what we would have to do is we'd have to install the ocs.url.deb. Now, .deb files, the way that they work is they're pre-compiled binaries that you can download, and they will allow you to install software kind of like it does on Windows. A little bit different though, because what it'll do on Mint, most of the time it'll bring up a an installer called gdebi, and what that'll do is it'll not only install the package, like in this case the .deb, but it'll look for the dependencies of any particular .deb file that you use. Because unlike Windows, okay, Linux will only install a dependency once. Flatpaks are the exception to this, but that's, again, a whole other thing. So, like, for example, let's say you need Python 3.0. That's just as an example, right? So, under Windows, if you had 5 programs that needed a Python 3.0, then it would simply install Python 3.0 5 times. Under Linux, what it'll do is it will only install Python 3.0 once, listed as a dependency, and then all 5 programs that need it will just call the dependency. I'm pretty oversimplifying it here, but that's kind of the very basic rundown. Okay, so our updates are about half done. Done. Okay. What else did I want to go over here? You have one big thing is just how much quicker it is. Like, bear in mind, I'm running this thing on very, very low specs. 128 megabytes of video RAM, 4 gigs of RAM, and 1 CPU processor core. And for those of you who don't know, my desktop is pretty old. It's good for what I use it for, but it's pretty old. And hey, now we're already configuring the last of the updates. So, another thing about Linux too is that generally you don't have to reboot after updates. In fact, it won't generally update you won't have to reboot nearly as often. So this set of updates you will have to reboot to reload the new kernel, because but the only time that generally you have to reboot with updates in Linux is for kernel updates. And even then, I don't think you technically have to, but it's going to be a lot easier than whatever other way you can find around it. Unless somebody, like, down in the comments is going to know way more than me and correct me on that, because I'm completely open to correction here, guys. I am not I'm not some kind of Linux whiz, I mean, I've met people who are, but if you ever meet a guy who, like, used Unix in the 70s, yeah, that's the guy that knows what he's talking about when it comes to Linux. Like my old boss. Okay, now we're just updating the bootloader. And this is only going to... This is actually... I know it says, this will take a minute, but this is only going to take a second. That's another really cool thing right here. Is that a Linux Mint comes with time shift that allows you to make easy backups. And anybody here, any of you guys ever worked in IT, which I assume some people watching this video have, you're gonna know that basically the 3 rules of IT are update or backups, backups, and backups. All right, so that is done. We now have a fully updated Linux Mint system from scratch install. That's all I have for today. Pray every day, and see you later. Don't forget to like and subscribe.